Hitchhiking, a means of transportation that is gained by asking individuals, usually strangers, for a ride in their car or other vehicle. This just seems like a horrible idea. I mean, weren't we taught about stranger danger and then getting in a vehicle with them and telling them where you're going? What? Hello everyone, I'm your host Emily, and today we are counting down our list of the top 10 real hitchhiker stories that will terrify you. Number 10. The Sweet Man. This story goes, there's a middle-aged man who lives in the town I'm from. His name is Henry, and he was a genuinely sweet and caring person. One day, he picked up a hitchhiker just outside of town. He told him to jump in the bed of the truck and he'd drive him to Walmart. About halfway there, the hitchhiker shot him in the back of the head for no reason. He didn't steal even anything, and if I remember correctly, he got caught. Henry didn't die, but he's permanently disabled and has severe brain damage. I remember when I first heard that and it scared the crap out of me. This was probably about 12 years ago now, but I still think about it anytime someone talks about hitchhikers. It scares me that someone would do something like that just because, and some people are just so messed up. Number 9. Creepy truck driver. I was backpacking through Austria and reached a point where I was too exhausted to walk any longer. I was in the middle of nowhere and decided to thumb a lift to the nearest train station. When a truck pulled up, I didn't hesitate to hop inside. I asked the driver if he could drop me off at the nearest station so that I could catch a train to Vienna, but he told me that he was heading back there anyway and he could take me there. He also told me that it wouldn't be a problem for him if I wanted to take off some clothes since it was such a hot day. I told him that I was fine, but he brought it up a couple more times. He also asked me if I wanted to take a nap in the back of the truck and that he had several hitchhikers sleep there in the past. I declined again and started to feel a little uneasy around him. He suddenly turned to me and said that I looked familiar. He asked me if I ever went to a swingers club because he was sure he saw me there sometime. Now that caught me off guard and I told him that was impossible because I'd never been to one. Well, do you want to? I'm going to one in Vienna, let's go together. I'm sure you'll like it, he said. I told him that I had no intention to come with him and asked him to drop me off now. He didn't answer but reached into his pants and started pleasuring himself while he drove along. I froze up, clutching my backpack on my lap and didn't know what to do. A gas station was coming up and he stopped what he was doing and asked if we should take a shower together. I figured there'd be more people around and that it would make it easier to get rid of him, so I told him sure. Why not? He pulled up and as soon as he stopped, I yanked open the door to run across the parking area of the gas station and kept running until the gas station was out of sight and I reached a busy street. Now, as a young woman, that is terrifying. Number 8. Got into a car with John Wayne Gacy. This user wrote, not my story, but my history teacher's hitchhiker's story. As a teenager, my teacher lived in Cook County, Illinois, and frequently would walk around the town and the city as most people do. One day, he was offered a ride by a largish man in a car and hitchhiked home. The driver had a clown suit and makeup kit in the back of his car because he said he worked as a clown part-time, which should have sent bells ringing, but he thought nothing of it. So he got driven to his mom's house and thanked the driver and left. My history teacher said the driver was one of the most polite people he's ever met, but a few years later my teacher found out that the man who we got into a car with was John Wayne Gacy Jr. Number 7. Anger issues. This story goes, during the late 60s, early 70s, when my dad was between 13 to 16 years old, he went on a big trip around northeast Quebec. As he's going along, he gets picked up by a bunch of Americans headed up the same way. It became pretty clear to him that these guys weren't completely sane, and not wanting to draw their attention to this fact, he figured that he would take the ride and ditch them as soon as possible. The first night, they ended up in a campground. While setting up stuff, one of the rangers came over and starts giving them trouble. Either they hadn't paid their fees or they just didn't want to pay. After a while, the ranger leaves and the Americans were really bothered by this guy. Rather than address the issue, they started putting together a plan to off this guy. They'd apparently brought some weapons across the border and thought it would be easier to kill the ranger than to be hassled about fees. When he realized what was going on and that these guys would not be talked out of it, he was thinking, what am I getting myself into? The next time the ranger came back, my dad approaches him right away and tells him that he's got to go. I'm not sure if he paid the guy or just warned him, but either way the ranger left and didn't come back. Excuse me, who jumps straight to murder like that? That's crazy. Number 6. Wrong car. Now this story is short but terrifying. A hitchhiker in Africa was picked up by two men in a green Nissan. He was told he got in the wrong car and they hit him in the face. After passing the drop-off point, the drivers tied up the victim, him and shot him in the leg 5 times. Fortunately, the victim got the attention of a driver and he was taken to a nearby hospital, but my god. Number 5. The partier. My best friend and I were invited up to a friend's cabin for the weekend and we brought along another friend. We were heading up to Point Alberni area and we kinda got stranded for several hours. It was just starting to get dark, then we saw a vehicle come down the highway that started to slow down. We immediately thought this is awesome, it was a Lexus, a nice big car, so we were excited to jump in. I ended up getting in the front seat and my 2 friends got in the back. Right away, I got a vibe like a fear and loathing thing. This guy was wearing a suit, but he was kind of undone and looked sweaty and stressed out. We tried to make small talk, but he'd respond with something completely different. Now at this point we were speeding down the highway at 100 kilometers an hour, so it's not like we could just jump out. It seemed like he was in a rush. At some point he asked us, "Do you guys party? Do you mind if I party?" We were like, kind of, what do you mean? He says, "Do you guys mind if I do some drugs?" And we were like, yeah, actually we do mind. He just kind of looked a bit embarrassed and shocked. He seemed genuinely upset. I asked, "Have you been on drugs since you were driving us just now?" And he didn't really answer me. We didn't talk for another hour and a half, and when he dropped us off, we made sure it was far from where we were going. I don't even know what to say. Number 4. You sure are pretty. I was 18 at the time, driving to get some food on my lunch break. I saw a man probably in his 50s trying to hitch a ride. I was pretty hesitant to stop, so I drove by. I felt guilty though, remembering my mom always stopping to help people, so I turned around and offered a ride. He introduced himself and thanked me profusely. He apparently had groceries and told me that he didn't want his meat to spoil. He asked to be dropped off at the post office, which was not too far away. As I drove off, he stared at me for a good minute and the sirens went off in my head. After a bit, he blurted out, "You sure are pretty," and asked me for my number. I said, "No, I have a boyfriend and I'm not interested in the least bit." He kept asking and insisting that my relationship status was irrelevant. I asked him to stop and he became aggressive. I veered into the closest turn-in, slammed on my brakes and yelled, "Is it too much to ask for a little good karma every now and then? Get out of my car, you cad." And then just got out, much to my surprise. He ended up forgetting his groceries, and what scared me the most was the fact that there was no meat, just some eggplants and nonsense. Now that I'm older and hopefully smarter, I will think about who I pick up a little more. That, and it also helps to have my 80-pound dog in tow. Number 3. Wanted for murder. One user says, "My dad was traveling through Arizona on his way to Mexico. He looked to the side of the road and he saw a man hitchhiking. My dad pulled over and asked where the guy was going, to which the man said the next town over. My dad, being a very trusting man, and this being the 70s or 80s, decided he would give him a ride. While they were driving, they started talking and my father asked for his name. His name was Derp. My dad, quite shocked, looked at him and replied, 'Holy crap, that's my name.' They had a few small conversations, and at the next town, my dad let him out and continued to Mexico. He eventually reached the border. He pulled up and the border official asked to see his license. He took a good long look at the license. The official then took off his big aviator sunglasses and told him to pull over to the side. My dad got out of the car and they put him in a room while they searched his car. He was sitting in the room for a good few hours, admiring the entire wall of confiscated tequila when the officer walked back in and apologized for the wait. My dad asked what the reason was, and the officer replied, "There's a warrant out for the arrest of Derp." Once again, dazed, my dad asked, "What for?" The officer replied, "Murder." My dad damn near crapped his pants. Now, I can't imagine knowing that you drove around a murderer and pretty much helped them evade the police. Number 2. Hitchhiker murders. On June 12, 1982, 22-year-old Marty Shook left his mother's home in Sparks, Nevada to travel to Colorado. He was planning to hitchhike to reach his destination. 2 days later, a fly fisherman discovered Marty's nude body near Daniels Canyon in Wasatch County, Utah. He was shot in the back of the head, and most disturbingly, Marty's had been removed and were missing from the scene. On August 19, 1981, the nude body of 30-year-old Wayne Reinfer was found in a wooded area near Williamsburg, Pennsylvania. Like Marty, Shook had been shot in the back of the head and his were removed and never found. On November 24, 1986, a nude body of a 26-year-old hitchhiker, Jack Andrews, was found at a rest stop near Litchfield, Connecticut. Even though he had not been shot and the cause of death was never determined, the victim's were missing. His nipples were also removed and both legs had been severed at mid-thigh. While the same person may have been responsible for all 3 murders, they remain unsolved. And that's just creepy. And coming in at number 1, not so friendly stranger. This internet user says his family friend Nikki was one of the kindest women he'd ever met, and one time in her 20s, when it was the early 80s, she picked up a hitchhiker. The man was really polite, if not a bit shy, when he asked for a lift into the city. They talked pleasantly for most of the trip. She felt that they were getting on really well and bought him dinner at one of the pit stops a little over halfway there. As soon as they got into the city, he thanked her profusely for the ride and the food and asked to be dropped off once they hit downtown. Before getting out, he asked for Nikki's phone number, she gave it to him, and a week later she got a call from him. He told her that she should thank God that she was raised so nice, because when he first got in the car, he was planning on SAing and murdering her once they got to that pit stop. What? Then he was going to steal the car and dump her body in a ditch further down the road and go on his merry way. But after she talked to him so kindly and treated him to dinner with a smile on her face, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't think that he could live with himself after doing that to such a nice lady. And to please, please, please never ever pick up another hitchhiker. Then he hung up the phone. Nikki never got a call from him again, and when she tried redialing the number, she got a payphone. That is just plain disturbing. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 real hitchhiker stories that will terrify you. Have you ever hitchhiked or picked up a hitchhiker? I never have. I watched too many true crime shows to know the dangers of getting in a vehicle with a stranger, especially as a young woman. Well, comment down your experiences down below and make sure to like and subscribe while you're down there. I'm your host Emily, and I'll see you next time. Peace.